Hi everyone, welcome to FN Arena. I'm Daniela Coulier and I'm here with the one and only, the editor of FN Arena, Rudy Philippek van Dijk.
Pleasure to be here, Danny.
Okay, so we are here today because we have been working hard, the whole team at FN Arena, for the last few months, putting together a very, very special report on probably the biggest topic that is dominating the markets at the moment, Rudy, and that, of course, is generative AI.
I know it sounds hyperbole, but I do believe that this is potentially the most important phenomenon that comes along in our lifetime. So investors should definitely pay attention.
Now, it's really interesting because markets move incredibly quickly, particularly in this day and age where we have democratization of investing and so much information out there. What makes you think generative AI is really the real deal and is really the mega trend that some people are describing as the fourth industrial revolution, Rudy?
I like to draw conclusions from the past, and my favorite time to reference is the 1920s. So it's a little bit about 100 years ago. That was a tremendous time for society. It was a tremendous time for economies, for businesses, and clearly a tremendous time for investors as well, because all that new growth was reflected in the share market. I've been saying since 2015, we are going through a similar time. We have been going through a similar time. If you pay attention to my research, and you don't even have to ignore my research, but you can just pay attention to the share market. You've seen that the dynamics have changed, and that is because we are going through a time of great innovation, great leaps forward in technology. And I think that Gen AI is simply the next step in that evolution.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've heard statistics, Rudy, that when you compare it to other big mega trends, like as they call it, mobile over in the US, mobile telephony, of course, we've all got used to our smartphones. Well, this could be an order of magnitude of about 3 to 5 times larger than that. And it's also really interesting. These are the topics that we delve into in the special report of the size of how much generative AI is going to add to our economies. And when I was researching, Rudy, what I found most interesting, it was almost like the goalposts kept on moving in front of my eyes every time you'd say, well, it's going to be a 3 or 4 trillion contribution to the US economy. And before you know it, McKinsey's is out there saying 11 trillion, and then it's up to 25 trillion. So, Rudy, do you think when people hear these numbers, it's almost overwhelming for them to understand the potential enormity of what is going on?
I think there's a few things that, yes, we should all be taken into account. One is none of us has experienced anything like this, and that goes for the two of us, goes for everyone in the share market, goes for anyone who's now supposedly putting out forecasts. This is really new for us. The only reference we have is history. Equally important to point out, this will not go in a straight line, and that history shows that. So, and also take into account, this is phase one. So we get different beneficiaries now than down the track. And again, this will be a process that continuously evolves. I think we've done a great job. We've put together almost 80 pages of in-depth research, analysis, forecasts, specifically mentioning Australian companies, some companies in the US. This clearly is not the end product. This is available right now for everyone who subscribes to FN Arena. So if you're a subscriber, download the report. If you're not a subscriber, there's something to consider. And clearly, this is a process that will continuously going on, and we will obviously continue to follow this very closely.
Okay, let's give them a taste because it's really important that people understand that the word bubble, Rudy, is
Mhm.
being thrown out there into the marketplace. So when we talk about the top-down macro about Gen AI, there is, of course, then the translation back to the stocks, back in the share market, the valuations and things like that. So at this point in time, do you think there's just too much hype out there? And is it a case of we're going to have to continue to see these companies actually put those earnings forward to justify what the market's been discounting?
Well, easiest conclusion to make is that we are overexcited in the short term, but then we underestimate how much is still coming down the track. Investors will have to be more flexible. They will have to leave behind the fact that they can only invest in undervalued stocks. Once the market takes once the market catches on with how much growth there is, it will never be cheap again. But that doesn't mean that those companies are no longer investment grade. So investors will have to get their head around, maybe learn something from the future, have a lot of keep the finger on the pulse, and clearly keep up to date with what's happening.
Okay, the other big question, of course, with generative AI, you have the winners, but you're also going to have the losers. Is this a case in point, Rudy, where every company really needs to get on board because otherwise they risk being the next Kodak or the next Simplicity Patents, which was actually part of the Nifty 50 in the early 70s when women used to make their clothes?
I think it's worse. I think it's actually similar to the 1930s or 1920s, 1930s, similar to the 70s, 80s. I think there will be companies that simply cannot keep up.
Yeah.
And so we will have winners, we will have losers, and we will have a hybrid in between. And this is why it's so important for investors to get their head around what is happening. Because and this is the phase one, Gen AI requires a lot of investments to be made. I mean, not all companies will be able to make those investments. Not all companies will be able to make those investments successfully. Not all companies, even though they will make these investments, they will do it successfully, will actually benefit from it. Sometimes it's need to do it, not to be left behind.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing as tapping into new growth. So there's a lot of subtlety here. There's a lot of stages, there's a lot of uncertainties and unknowns, and that's why it's a moving feast.
Absolutely. And just another point that is worth working or at least touching on is all the other adjacent industries that are going to be part of generative AI. And of course, we are talking here in Australia about the likes of data centers. And if you want to, Rudy, mention some stocks, but also the fact that there's so much energy that's going to have to be produced at a time when the world is grappling with the whole concept of climate change, ESG, and net zero emissions. So again, really big topics that we cover in the report, but we'll continue to cover. So before we wrap up, Rudy, let's just remind everybody, this is effectively a printed out cover of what you'll be able to find in terms of the special report at FN Arena, 80 pages. But let's just throw out a couple of stocks just to give them an idea of what is mentioned in this report, Rudy.
Well, obvious one, the prime beneficiary here is Microsoft. I mean, we all know that. We've seen it in the share market. In Australia, the prime beneficiaries are, at this point in time, are Goodman Group and NextDC. But that doesn't mean that they will remain the only ones and will remain the key ones. This is just phase one. And clearly the report mentions many more stocks. And you know what? As this process unfolds, we will discover many more winners and losers.
Absolutely. So be sure to go to fnarena.com and check out, well, you can have a trial, can't you? There's a free
14 days.
14-day trial to check out the service.